Hey everybody, happy Wax on Wednesdays. It's warming up here in the studio. It's springtime, so it's time to transition over to some cold wax. There's a couple of different kinds of cold wax that I use. One of them is the Gamblin, and that is what I'm using today, and the other one is Dorland's. They each have just a slightly different recipe to them, and you can also make your own in the studio. There's several recipes out there for making your own cold wax medium. And today I'm working on a rigid surface, a hard wood panel like I usually do. So for this, I can really use any amount of wax ratio to the oil paint that I want. If I were using a canvas, then I would want to use less than 30% of wax to oil paint, just because later on down the line it could possibly crack off. I myself usually work on the panels because that's what I have for encaustic in the studio anyway, so I just continue using the same panels that I do when I'm painting with hot wax or encaustic. So cold wax has its own elements that are fun. It's quite different from encaustic, and I can still use the same medium, same exact mediums that I use with the encaustic I can use with cold wax. And in this case, I'm mixing the cold wax with the oil directly on my palette first, and then going ahead and applying it to the board. And right now I'm just putting color down. There's really no rhyme or reason. I've just got my horizon line in and just getting some color down. The board was prepped with some gesso prior to painting. And here I'm using a palette knife to get the color on the board, but just like usual, I'm going to eventually give up this palette knife and go right for the fingers, the gloved hands. I tend to paint my abstract landscapes and abstract anything with my fingers. It's just the way I paint, and for me, it keeps it, there I go, keeps it loose. It keeps me loose. Every time I put a tool in my hand, I tend to kind of overwork what I'm going for and start getting a little bit too detailed. And if you start getting too detailed, but you're going for a really loose painting, then you can end up with a mess. So I usually just use my fingers for most of it to prevent me from overworking it. And it's just a really fun, loose way to paint and just kind of paint what I feel at the time, and make sure that I always have gloves on because I am working with oil-based paint. So one of the aspects of cold wax medium is that it doesn't dry instantaneously like encaustic, as you can see, but it does dry quicker than traditional oil paints would. So you've got a faster drying time than traditional oil paints, but certainly nowhere near the instantaneous effect that you have with a hot wax or encaustic. But the fun thing about that is that as this painting dries, you can dig back into the layers and start scraping in, and each level of a dryness that the painting has gives you a different element that you can maybe add some finer detail as it dries a little bit. You can scrape back into previous layers. You can continue to add. So it's kind of fun to play with this, to play with the cold wax at different stages of dryness. The majority of this particular painting I'm doing is wet on wet, so I can show you. And that also helps with keeping it really loose. Is just painting directly wet on wet helps also keep me really loose and prevents me from overworking the piece. And using my gloved hands is just the way I go about doing my paintings, but there's really a lot of tools, cool tools that you can use with cold wax. And so in the next few weeks, I'll show you a few of those tools. They can give some really cool effects in the cold wax. So here in a bit, I end up picking back up the palette knife and working with it and a little bit more than I should. And I end up overworking the painting for me, for what I was going for, a little bit, in my opinion. But, I'm a work in progress and myself. And so you just have to keep on painting. And every single painting, whether you're in love with it or not, in the end, every single painting you learn from it. Whether you're learning about your medium or you're learning about your composition, or even if you're learning about yourself and what you like and don't like, every single painting you're learning something. And so you just have to keep on painting. And this dried overnight, and it's not completely dry. I'm going back in and adding in some little grasses with the palette knife. So there are a lot of aspects to cold wax painting that are a lot of fun. So I hope that you give it a try if you haven't already. It's also very portable, so you can take it outside, unlike your traditional encaustic. So in the next few weeks, I will be showing a few more things that you can do with cold wax. So have a great week and happy creating.